The lecture hall was filled with sounds from 200 different alien students. They clicked, hummed, and sang in their own languages as they found their seats. The room was large and round, with rows of seats going up like stairs. At the bottom center stood Professor Velkash, a tall being with skin that looked like crystal. Light bounced off his body in rainbow colors. Professor Velkash touched a control pad, and a floating image appeared in the air above him. It showed a planet spinning slowly. The planet had blue oceans, green and brown land, and white clouds swirling across its surface. To most of the aliens in the room, it looked peaceful and pretty. "Welcome to Advanced Xenobiology, Deathworld Classifications," the professor said. His words came out as deep musical tones, but a small device changed them into the common language everyone understood. "Today we will study the most dangerous type of planet that has intelligent life." The floating image got bigger, showing more details of the planet's surface. Mountains rose high into the sky. Oceans covered most of the world. Forests spread across the land like green carpets. "This planet is called Terra," Professor Velkash continued. "We classify it as a Class 12 death world. By normal standards, nothing should be able to live here. But somehow intelligent beings not only survived on this world, they became the dominant species." Whispers and surprised sounds filled the room. Several bug-like students made clicking noises with their mouths, which meant they didn't believe what they heard. In the back row, a young woman named Amy Morrison sat very still. She kept her face blank and calm. Amy was the only human at the academy, and she had learned to stay quiet. Drawing attention to herself usually caused problems. Most aliens thought a nice spring day was deadly dangerous. They would never understand what it was like to grow up on Earth. "Let us start with the air," Professor Velkash said. The floating image changed to show colored bars and numbers. Terra's atmosphere contains 21% oxygen. This is extremely dangerous. Most species would start dying within hours of breathing this air. Their cells would break down from the corrosive oxygen. Amy remembered when a blue-skinned alien student accidentally walked into her room last month. The air in her room was what she needed to breathe, but it was considered oxygen-rich by everyone else. The poor alien needed medical help immediately. "The gravity on Terra," the professor went on, "is 9.8 meters per second squared. This is almost double what we consider safe. If most species stayed on Terra for a long time, their bones would crush under their own weight." A cat-like student with shimmering fur raised her paw. Her name was Lyra. "Professor, how could complex life develop under such crushing force?" "That is a logical question, Cadet Lyra," Professor Velkash agreed. "Terra's dominant species evolved over millions of years in these exact conditions. Their muscles and bones grew incredibly strong just to handle normal movement. When humans are placed in normal galactic environments with less gravity, they have strength that seems almost magical." Amy thought about her first day at the academy. She had tried to help another student carry his luggage. She picked up the container with one hand, not knowing that it would take special equipment for most species to lift it. For weeks afterward, other students whispered about the terrifying strength of the human. The floating image changed again, showing different parts of Earth. Frozen lands covered in ice and snow, hot deserts with no water, thick jungles with rain pouring down, flat plains where wind howled across empty space. "The planet's weather changes dramatically," Professor Velkash explained. "Temperatures range from -40 to +50 degrees Celsius in places where beings live. Some areas get frozen water falling from the sky. Others face windstorms that move faster than 300 kilometers per hour." "That's impossible," said a student whose body looked like clear jelly. "How could any species build technology while constantly fighting just to stay alive?" Professor Velkash's crystal face moved in what might have been a smile. "An excellent question. Scientists believe the hostile environment actually made them develop faster. They had to compete for food and resources. They needed to build shelter. They had to find ways to keep food from spoiling during harsh seasons. All these pressures forced them to become smarter and more creative." The professor brought up new images. These showed animals from Earth. Great white sharks with rows of sharp teeth, crocodiles with powerful jaws, huge white bears, snakes with deadly poison, spiders with venom that could kill. The lecture hall filled with scared sounds from the students. Many of these creatures could easily kill a human, Professor Velkash said. Yet humans not only lived alongside these predators, they became the most powerful species on the planet. They did this through intelligence, making tools, and something humans call persistence hunting. A video played in the air. It showed human hunters following an animal for hours and hours, never stopping, never giving up. The animal they chased kept running until it was too tired to go on. Then the humans caught it. Humans have unusual endurance, the professor continued. They are not the fastest species, but they can keep moving at a steady pace for extraordinary distances. They would chase prey animals until the animals collapsed from exhaustion. Very few species in the galaxy hunt this way. Amy noticed several students turning to look at her. She kept her eyes forward, pretending not to notice. Human biology has several unusual features, Professor Velkash went on. They heal remarkably fast from injuries that would kill most species. They can eat and digest a very wide variety of food, including things that would poison most of us. Their immune system is so aggressive that sometimes it attacks their own bodies by mistake. Yet this same system lets them survive diseases that would wipe out other species. The professor paused and looked around the room. And perhaps most disturbing, humans evolved from pursuit predators. Their eyes face forward to track prey. They have persistence and patience for long hunts. These are predator traits. Only 3 species in known space evolved this way. The lecture hall became very quiet. Amy could feel dozens of eyes staring at her. But surely, said a brave student named Ren, they have overcome these primitive instincts. Civilization must have made them less aggressive? Professor Velkash tilted his head thoughtfully. Humans have indeed built advanced civilizations. They create art, music, literature, and philosophy. They have complex societies and moral codes. He paused. They also have a history of nearly constant warfare spanning their entire recorded existence. Fear rippled through the audience like a wave. Their stories glorify concepts like never giving up and fighting until death. They have a saying, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." This is not just words. Their bodies literally adapt to stress. They deliberately damage their muscles through exercise so the muscles will rebuild even stronger. Amy held back a smile. She remembered how confused and horrified her roommate looked when Amy explained her morning workout routine. Humans form deep emotional bonds, Professor Velkash said, his tone becoming serious. They are perhaps most dangerous when those bonds are threatened. Human history is full of examples of individuals doing seemingly impossible things when protecting loved ones. They have a hormone called adrenaline that temporarily makes them even stronger, blocks pain, and sharpens their focus. The professor dimmed the floating image. If you ever meet a human who needs help, the coalition encourages you to offer assistance. However, if you encounter a human protecting someone they care about, or defending their territory, it is recommended that you leave immediately and call for trained mediators. He looked around the amphitheater. Are there any questions? Silence filled the room for a long moment. Then, slowly, a hand rose in the back row. Every head in the hall turned. Amy Morrison stood up. Her height of 5 feet 6 inches seemed enormous under the weight of 200 alien stares. Yes, Cadet Morrison, Professor Velkash said. His voice carried a note of curiosity. Amy took a deep breath. Professor, I appreciate the thorough lecture, but I feel I should mention something. She paused, then spoke in a clear, steady voice. I'm from that world. The lecture hall exploded in chaos. Students jumped from their seats. Some made alarmed sounds. Others backed away. A few simply stared in shock. The calm, quiet student who had sat among them for months was from the Deathworld they had just learned about. The human had been there all along. News spread through the academy faster than light-speed travel. By the time Amy reached her room, her communication device was flooded with messages. Most students suddenly remembered they had important business elsewhere whenever she walked near them. A few curious ones wanted to know what it was like to grow up on a Deathworld. Amy's roommate was waiting in their shared quarters. Her name was Zixia, and she came from a species called Avarians. She had colorful feathers that looked like they had been painted with rainbows, and her bones were hollow like a bird's. She sat on her sleeping platform with her large eyes wider than normal. "Amy, I had no idea," Zixia said. Her voice came out as musical chirps, but the translator device made it understandable. "When the housing office put us together, they said you were from a remote world. I thought they meant a planet with few people, not one actively trying to kill you every day." Amy set down her bag and took off her heavy boots. The boots were specially made so she wouldn't crack the floor with her weight. "Terra's really not that bad once you're used to it. Most days the planet isn't actively trying to kill you." "Most days?" Zixia's feathers stood up in alarm. "I'm joking," Amy said, though she wasn't entirely joking. She remembered tornado sirens from her childhood in Kansas. She remembered the black widow spider that nested in her garage. She remembered the winter storm that knocked out power for a week. "Look, Zix, I'm the same person I was yesterday. The only thing that changed is now everyone knows where I'm from." Zixia clicked her beak as she thought. "The others are frightened. There's talk of requesting room changes. Some want to avoid you in training exercises." Amy felt a heavy weight settle in her chest. This was exactly why she had kept quiet about her home planet. "What about you? Do you want a new roommate?" The bird-like alien was quiet for a moment. Then she fluttered down from her high perch. Despite being much shorter than Amy, she moved closer. "You have never hurt me. You go out of your way to be gentle when we share this space. You apologized for 3 days when you accidentally startled me." Zixia's feathers relaxed into a calmer position. "I believe I know who you are better than some educational video does." Amy felt grateful. "Thanks, Zix, that means a lot." However, Zixia added, her tone becoming sharper. "You could have mentioned that you were from a planet where it rains acid and the air burns lungs." "It doesn't rain acid, usually, and the air only seems corrosive to species who aren't adapted to it," Amy protested. Then, seeing her roommate's expression, she gave in. "Okay, fair point. I should have been more honest from the start." The next morning, Amy walked to her combat theory class. She noticed how other students formed an empty bubble of space around her in the corridors. Students who used to nod hello now pressed themselves against the walls as she passed. The instructor for combat theory was Commander Torval. He came from a warrior species called the Kryn. He had 4 arms and was known for brilliant tactical thinking. He was one of the few instructors who treated Amy normally since she arrived. His species had worked with human military advisors before, so humans weren't completely strange to him. "Cadet Morrison," he said as she entered the training hall. "A word before we begin?" Amy walked over to him. She noticed several other students suddenly found reasons to check their equipment on the far side of the room. "I suspect today will be challenging for you," Commander Torval said quietly. His lower arms moved in a gesture that meant concern in his culture. "The other students are afraid. Fear makes people unpredictable." "I can handle it, sir," Amy replied. "I don't doubt that you can," the commander said. "I'm more concerned about whether you should have to. Would you prefer different training today? Individual computer simulations?" It was tempting to accept his offer, but Amy shook her head. "Respectfully, sir, avoiding them will only make things worse. They need to see that I'm not some kind of monster." Commander Torval's mouth parts clicked in what might have been approval. "Very well. But Morrison, remember that humans aren't the only species in the galaxy with pride. If someone challenges you today, show restraint." The class began with theory and strategy discussions. But Amy could feel tension building in the room. Finally, during the practical exercises, it exploded. "I don't want her as a partner," declared a student named Jexalon. His species looked like walking rhinoceroses that stood upright. "It's not a fair match. She's from a Deathworld. She'd crush me without even trying." Commander Torval's voice was firm. "Cadet Morrison has been training with all of you for 6 months without incident. Her record shows perfect control and no problems." "Because we didn't know what she was," Jexalon interrupted. His thick skin turned darker with emotion. "Now we know she's been holding back. She's a predator pretending to be harmless." Amy felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her voice level and calm. "I've never pretended to be anything, and I've never hurt anyone here. Your whole planet is covered in creatures that could kill with a single bite or sting," added another student named Prill. Her transparent skin showed her racing pulse. "Professor Velkash showed us. You live with death constantly." How do we know you won't lose control? Because humans don't just lose control, Amy said, feeling her patience wearing thin. We have self-control. We have empathy. We have laws and ethics and social rules just like every other civilized species. Easy for you to say, Jexalon shot back. You're not the one who has to worry about being torn apart by something that could crush your skull with one hand. Enough. Commander Torval's voice cut through the rising argument. Cadet Jexalon, since you have concerns about Cadet Morrison's capabilities, I'm assigning you as her partner for today's exercise. Non-lethal restraint scenarios. Jexalon's skin went pale. Commander, I don't think that's a good idea. It wasn't a request. Cadet, you will face Morrison in a controlled environment with full safety rules, and you will learn firsthand whether your fears have merit. Commander Torval's 4 eyes fixed on the large student, unless you'd prefer to withdraw from combat theory entirely. No, sir, Jexalon muttered. The other students formed a wide circle around the training mat. Amy stepped onto the marked area, very aware of dozens of eyes watching her every move. Jexalon took his position on the opposite side. His bulk was much larger than hers. Under normal circumstances, his species had considerable strength. These were not normal circumstances. Standard restraint rules, Commander Torval announced. First to achieve a submission hold for 5 seconds wins. Excessive force will result in immediate disqualification. Begin, Jexalon charged forward, apparently deciding that overwhelming force was his best choice. Amy sidestepped smoothly, using his momentum against him. She didn't even need to use the extra strength that horrified other species. She just used basic technique from her high school wrestling team back on Earth. The rhinoceros-like student crashed past her, stumbled, and turned for another attempt. This time Amy was ready. She ducked under his reaching arms, swept his legs out from under him, and used a joint lock she had learned to perform at half strength. Jexalon went down hard and Amy held the position carefully, always carefully, until Commander Torval called the match. 5 seconds. Winner, Cadet Morrison. Amy released Jexalon immediately and offered him a hand up. He stared at it for a moment, then took it. As she pulled him to his feet with ease, she met his eyes. I could have hurt you, she said quietly so only he could hear. But I didn't, I won't, that's not who I am. Jexalon nodded slowly. Something changed in his expression. I apologize, Cadet Morrison. My fear made me speak unfairly. The tension in the training hall didn't completely disappear, but it cracked like ice breaking. Commander Torval nodded with approval. An important lesson for all of you, he addressed the class. Fear of the unknown is natural, but knowledge and experience fight fear. Cadet Morrison is not defined only by her planet of origin any more than any of you are. She is defined by her choices, her actions, and her character. After class, as Amy gathered her equipment, a small group approached. Zixia was among them, along with several students who had previously kept their distance. Cadet Morrison, said Lyra, the cat-like student who had asked questions during Professor Velkash's lecture. Some of us were wondering if you would be willing to answer questions. About Terra, about humans. We realized we might have been reacting to stories rather than reality. Amy thought for a moment, then nodded. Sure, but on one condition. What's that? Lyra asked. You have to stop calling me Cadet Morrison like I'm some kind of exotic specimen understudy. Just Amy is fine. Lyra's whiskers moved in what might have been a smile. Agreed. Just Amy it is. As they walked toward the student common area together, Amy felt cautiously hopeful. It wouldn't be easy and there would be more challenges ahead. But maybe, just maybe, she could help them understand that being from a death world didn't make her a monster. It just made her human. The student common area was designed for many different species. It had various types of seats, different air mixtures in different zones and areas with adjusted gravity. Amy and her small group settled into a neutral zone, where the environmental controls tried to make everyone comfortable. Word spread quickly about the human question session. What started as 5 students grew to nearly 20 by the time they sat down. Amy found herself in the center of a half-circle of curious and still somewhat nervous alien faces. So, Lyra began, settling her cat-like body onto a cushioned platform. Professor Velkash said Terra has predators that could easily kill humans. Is that actually true? Amy nodded. Absolutely. Polar bears, saltwater crocodiles, great white sharks, any of those could kill an unarmed human. And that's not even counting the smaller things like venomous snakes, spiders, jellyfish, or poisonous plants. A collective shudder ran through the group. A student named Kolvan, whose species looked like an upright praying mantis, clicked his mouthparts. Then how did your species survive long enough to develop civilization? Were you always armed with weapons? Not always, Amy said. Early humans used intelligence and cooperation. We made tools. We worked in groups. We learned which plants were safe and which animals to avoid. We used fire to keep predators away at night. Fire? Prill, the transparent student, looked horrified. The uncontrolled chemical reaction? You used burning plasma as a defensive measure? Amy had to stop herself from laughing at the description of campfires as plasma. We learned to control it. Fire gave us warmth, cooked our food to make it safer to eat, and yes, kept dangerous animals away. Eventually, we domesticated it completely. Domesticated plasma, Priel muttered, her clear skin rippling with worry. Of course you did. What about the weather? Asked Ren, the student who had questioned human civilization during the lecture. The professor said temperatures changed wildly. How did you cope with that? Clothing mostly, Amy explained. We learned to use animal skins, then plant fibers, eventually synthetic materials. We built shelters that kept us warm in winter and cool in summer. Humans are actually pretty good at adapting to different climates. But you can't naturally survive in extreme cold, Zixia pointed out. I've noticed you need extra layers even here where we keep temperatures moderate. True, Amy admitted. Humans can't survive long exposure to freezing temperatures without protection. But that's where technology comes in. We adapted our environment to suit us instead of the other way around. Jexalon, who had been quietly listening since the training incident, spoke up. The professor mentioned that humans deliberately injure themselves to become stronger. That can't actually be true, can it? Amy smiled. It's called exercise. When we stress our muscles, they develop tiny tears. As they heal, they rebuild stronger. Same with our bones. They respond to stress by becoming denser. Our cardiovascular system improves when we challenge it. It's not about injury exactly. It's about adaptation. Your bodies just decide to become stronger. Lyra's tail moved in disbelief. That seems impossibly convenient. It's evolution, Amy shrugged. Our ancestors who could adapt to physical stress survived better than those who couldn't. Eventually, that ability became standard for the species. A quiet, crystalline student named Shen, whose body occasionally made musical sounds when he moved, asked, "What about the emotional aspects?" The professor said humans form intense bonds and become dangerous when those bonds are threatened. Amy paused, thinking carefully about her answer. That's true, but it's not as scary as it sounds. Yes, humans are protective of people we care about. But that's not unique to us, is it? Most intelligent species protect their families and communities. But the adrenaline response, Shen pressed. This hormone that makes you stronger and blocks pain. That sounds like a rage state where you lose control. It's not uncontrolled, Amy said firmly. Adrenaline kicks in during high-stress situations like danger, fear, sometimes extreme excitement. It sharpens our focus and gives us access to reserves of strength we don't normally use. But we're still rational during an adrenaline surge. We don't just attack randomly. She thought for a moment, then added, Actually, let me tell you a story. When I was 8 years old, my younger brother wandered away from our home. He was only 4 and got lost in the woods near our house. My parents were terrified. There were bears and mountain lions in that area, plus the risk of him falling and getting hurt. The students leaned forward, fascinated. I helped search for him. When I finally found him 3 hours later, he was at the edge of a steep cliff, crying and scared. I had to climb down a rocky slope to reach him. Amy smiled at the memory. I was scared out of my mind. My heart was pounding. But I wasn't thinking about being afraid. I was just thinking about getting to my brother. That's adrenaline. It helped me do something difficult because someone I loved needed help. What happened? Zixia asked quietly. I got him back up the slope. We made it home and my mom cried so hard I thought she'd never stop. My brother is 17 now and he still insists he could have climbed out himself. Amy grinned. But the point is, the adrenaline response isn't about violence. It's about survival and protection. It can be used for violence, sure, but it can also be used for rescue, for endurance, for pushing through when you have to. So humans are protective, Lyra said slowly, but not mindlessly aggressive? Exactly. We have the capacity for violence, honestly, most species do. But we also have empathy, compassion, and ethics. The same instincts that make us protective also make us want to help others, even strangers. Colvan tilted his triangular head. Can you give us an example? Of humans helping others, I mean. Amy thought for a moment. Okay, here's one. In Earth's history, there are countless examples of humans risking or sacrificing their own lives to save others. Sometimes people they didn't even know. We have a saying, greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. But humans have done this for strangers too. During natural disasters, wars, accidents, you'll find stories of people running toward danger to help others escape. That seems counterintuitive from a survival perspective, Wren observed. Maybe, Amy agreed. But humans are social creatures. We survived as a species because we cooperated, because we helped each other. That instinct is deeply embedded in us. We don't just protect our own lives. We protect our communities, our societies, sometimes even people we've never met, because they're still part of the larger human family. There was a thoughtful silence. Then Priel asked almost shyly, "What's it like, growing up on Terra?" Amy leaned back with a fond smile on her face. "Honestly, it's beautiful. Yes, there are dangers, but there's also incredible diversity. We have deserts and rainforests, mountains and oceans, frozen lands and tropical islands. Every region has its own life forms, its own challenges, its own beauty." She continued, warming to the subject. "I grew up in a place with 4 distinct seasons. Spring brought new growth, flowers blooming, baby animals being born. Summer was hot and perfect for swimming. Fall turned all the leaves brilliant colors before they fell. Winter covered everything in snow. It was cold, yeah, but also peaceful and beautiful." "You enjoyed the seasonal death cycle?" Shen asked, genuinely confused. "When you put it like that, it sounds grim," Amy laughed. "But it's not death. It's a cycle. Things grow, mature, rest, and grow again. There's a rhythm to it. And humans have celebrations tied to these cycles. Festivals for planting and harvest, holidays during the darkest part of winter to bring light and warmth together." "Tell us about the animals," Lyra said. "Not the predators. The other ones." "Oh, there are so many." Amy's eyes lit up with excitement. "We have animals with scales, fur, feathers, shells. Some animals we domesticated thousands of years ago. Dogs were bred from wolves to be companions and helpers. Cats decided to live with us because we had mice in our grain stores. They're semi-domesticated at best," she grinned. "We have horses we can ride, cows that provide milk, chickens that give eggs. We learned to work with animals instead of just fearing them." "You ride animals?" Jexlon looked shocked. "You sit on their backs while they run?" "It's a partnership," Amy explained. "Horses are strong and fast. Humans are intelligent and can guide them. Together we could travel farther than either species could alone. Before we had vehicles, horses were our main form of transportation in many cultures." "This is fascinating," Colvan admitted. "The professor's lecture made Terra sound like a nightmare, but you make it sound almost appealing." "It's both," Amy said honestly. "Terra is dangerous if you're not prepared for it. But if you are prepared, if you understand the risks and respect them, it's home. It shaped us into what we are. Strong, adaptive, resilient, but also appreciative of beauty, protective of what we love, and determined to overcome obstacles." Zixia chirped thoughtfully. "I think I understand now. The death world didn't make you monsters. It made you survivors." "Exactly," Amy smiled at her roommate. "Every species is shaped by their homeworld. Yours gave you hollow bones and the ability to fly. Lyra's gave her species exceptional reflexes and hunting instincts. Mine gave humans endurance, adaptability, and stubbornness. We're all products of our environments." The conversation continued for another hour, covering 3 weeks after the famous lecture, life at the academy had settled into a new pattern. Amy was no longer treated as a walking threat by most students, though she still noticed some giving her space in the corridors. The question sessions had become regular events, with different students coming through to learn about human culture and Terra's life forms. Commander Torval had even made her a teaching assistant for combat theory. He figured her presence would force the other students to face their biases in a controlled setting. It was working slowly but surely. Amy was in the Academy's recreation center, helping Jexalon with wrestling techniques, when the emergency alarms began screaming. The sirens were deafening. They used multiple frequencies designed to be heard by every species in the facility. Red warning lights pulsed throughout the station, and the calm voice of the Academy's computer system filled the air. "Emergency. Hull breach detected in Science Wing Section 7. Atmospheric containment failure. All personnel evacuate affected areas immediately. Emergency response teams to designated stations. Amy's blood ran cold. Section 7 was where the science labs were located, including Professor Velkash's research areas. More importantly, she knew that several students had evening lab sessions scheduled there. "We need to go," Jexalon said, already moving toward the exit. The recreation center was clearing rapidly as students and instructors followed emergency rules, heading to their designated safe zones. But Amy had stopped. Her mind was racing. Section 7's safe zone meeting point was on her communicator's emergency display. She pulled it up, checking it against the lab schedules she had memorized during her teaching assistant duties. "No," she breathed. "Zixia has lab time in Section 7 tonight." Jexalon turned back. "Then she'll evacuate with everyone else. Come on, Amy. We have to get to our meeting point." But Amy was already accessing the station's emergency systems, pulling up the security video from Section 7. What she saw made her heart sink. The hull breach had happened near one of the main laboratory spaces. Emergency doors had sealed automatically as they were supposed to. But the system showed 3 life signs trapped on the wrong side of the doors, in a section that was rapidly losing air. One of those life signs was clearly a variant. "Zixia's trapped," Amy said, her voice tight. "She's got maybe 15 minutes of air in that section, less if she panics and breathes too fast." "Emergency response teams are already on their way," Jexalon urged. "They'll handle it. We need to evacuate." Amy was already running toward Section 7. "Amy, no. You can't go there." Jexalon's protest was cut off as Amy disappeared around a corner at a dead sprint. Her human body, adapted to Terra's crushing gravity, made her fast in the station's normal conditions. She covered ground at a pace that would have been impossible for most species. Her muscles and heart barely strained. The corridors leading to Section 7 were empty. Evacuation procedures had cleared them. Amy's Academy override codes, granted for her teaching assistant position, gave her access to restricted areas. She used them without hesitation. "Cadet Morrison," the computer's voice addressed her directly, "you are moving toward a hazardous zone. Turn back immediately." "Override teaching assistant emergency authorization," Amy said while running. "Medical rescue in progress." "Negative, Cadet Morrison. You are not trained for emergency response. Teams are on their way." Amy checked her communicator while running. The emergency response team was still 8 minutes away. They'd been doing drills in a distant section of the academy when the breach happened. 8 minutes might as well be forever. She reached the emergency door that sealed off Section 7. Through the reinforced window, she could see the damage. A piece of space debris, probably from the nearby asteroid field, had punched through the outer hull. The inner walls had held, but the air systems were failing. The air was visibly thin, and she could see frost forming on surfaces as the temperature dropped. 3 figures were visible. Zixia, plus 2 students Amy recognized from her classes, a Faloran and a Matharian. They were conscious but clearly in trouble, their movements slow in the thin air. "Amy." Zixia's voice came through the door's communication system, weak but desperate. "The air controls are damaged. We can't restore pressure." Amy assessed the situation with a clarity that surprised her. The emergency response team would need to set up proper containment, verify the structure was safe, and establish entry rules. All necessary procedures that would take at least 15 minutes from when they arrived. 23 minutes total. Her friends didn't have 23 minutes. But Amy had something the emergency response team didn't: a body adapted to survive in hostile conditions. She accessed the emergency locker next to the door, pulling out an oxygen tank and mask designed for rescue operations. She also grabbed emergency heat gear. It wasn't meant for vacuum, but it was better than nothing. "Amy, what are you doing?" Commander Torval's voice came through her communicator. He'd been alerted to her location. "Stand down." "That's an order." "Sir," Amy said as she suited up. "With respect, by the time the response team is in position, those students will be dead. I'm going in." "Morrison, the temperature in that section is dropping below freezing. The air pressure is already dangerous. You're not equipped for this." "Commander," Amy interrupted, "humans evolved to survive in extreme temperatures. We have emergency adaptations for low oxygen situations. I can hold my breath for over 2 minutes if I have to. The hazards in that section are dangerous, but they're not immediately lethal. Not for me. I can get them to the inner airlock where they'll have pressure and oxygen." There was a pause. Then Torvald's voice came back, resigned. You have 12 minutes before we come in after you. If you're not out by then with those students, I'm pulling you all out regardless of your condition. Understood? Understood, sir. 12 minutes. Amy took 3 deep breaths, breathing fast to load her blood with oxygen. It was a diving technique she'd learned growing up near the ocean. Then she triggered the emergency door override. The door opened, and the thin air hit her like a physical blow. It wasn't quite vacuum, but it was close. The pressure difference made her ears pop painfully, and the temperature was already well below freezing. Her exposed skin burned with cold, but Amy pushed forward. The oxygen mask helped, but she could feel the thin air fighting her with every breath. Her body, adapted to Earth's dense air, struggled to pull enough oxygen from what remained. But humans were persistence hunters. They didn't give up just because conditions were difficult. Zixia, she called out, her voice strange in the thin air. The inner airlock. Can you make it? Her roommate was slumped against a lab table, her feathers fluffed up in an instinctive but useless attempt to stay warm. The cat-like student Lyra was trying to help the Metherian who had collapsed. Too far, Zixia gasped. Can't breathe properly. Too cold, Amy assessed the situation. The inner airlock was about 40 meters away. Not far under normal conditions, but these weren't normal conditions. For species adapted to controlled environments, the cold and thin air were rapidly becoming lethal. But Amy had grown up in Kansas winters. She'd dealt with temperatures below zero during ice storms. She'd hiked in the Rocky Mountains at high altitude where the air was thin. She made her decision. Lyra, can you carry the Metherian if I help you? Amy asked. The cat-like student nodded weakly. I'll try. Amy took off the heat gear she'd grabbed and wrapped it around Zixia, who needed it most because of her hollow bones and limited cold tolerance. Then she helped Lyra get the unconscious Metherian onto her back. Stay together, Amy commanded, falling into the leadership role without thinking. I'll lead. Don't stop moving no matter what. She started forward, fighting the cold that was now seeping through her standard uniform. Her fingers were already numb, and she could feel the temperature draining her strength. But humans had walked across Ice Age continents. They'd climbed mountains where the air held half the oxygen of sea level. They'd survived. Amy would survive this. The 40 meters felt like 40 kilometers. Behind her, she could hear Lyra's labored breathing, Zixia's weak chirps. The Metherian remained unconscious. Amy focused on putting one foot in front of the other, drawing on reserves of stubbornness that were purely human. Her communicator made a sound. 10 minutes, Morrison. Status? Almost there. Amy managed through teeth that were starting to chatter. Another minute. The inner airlock door appeared ahead. Amy reached it, her hands so cold she could barely feel them as she worked the manual release. The door wouldn't move at first because of the pressure difference. Human stubbornness met human strength. Amy braced herself and pulled with everything she had, muscle fibers that had been adapted over thousands of years to lift, carry, and overcome tore slightly under the strain. But they held. The door groaned open. Inside now. Amy shoved Lyra and her burden through the opening. Zixia stumbled after them. Amy followed, pulling the door closed behind them and starting the air pressure restoration sequence. As air hissed into the small chamber, Amy collapsed against the wall, her body shaking uncontrollably from cold and effort. The adrenaline that had been keeping her going began to fade, and she became very aware of just how much damage she'd done to herself. 6 months after the hull breach incident, the Academy prepared for its annual survival evaluation. This was a big test that would decide which students advanced to officer training and which needed more practice. The evaluation was famous among students for being difficult and unpredictable. Amy sat in the briefing hall alongside 200 of her fellow students, waiting for Commander Torvald to explain this year's challenge. The atmosphere was tense with worry. Cadets, Torvald's voice cut through the nervous chatter. The survival evaluation is designed to test everything you've learned at this academy. Tactical thinking, species cooperation, resource management, and crisis response. The floating display activated, showing an unknown planetary system. This year, you will be divided into mixed species teams and sent to survey stations throughout the Colonies system. Each station will face practice emergencies. Your goal is to resolve these emergencies while keeping all team members safe. Amy noticed several students glancing her way. She'd become something of a standard for handling crises after the Section 7 incident. Teams will be announced shortly, Torvald continued. You will have 1 week to prepare, then deploy for a 72-hour evaluation period. Remember, this is not a competition between teams. Every team that successfully completes their scenarios passes. The only failure is giving up. The team assignments appeared on the displays. Amy scanned the list and found her name grouped with 5 other students: Zixia, Jexalon, Lyra, Kolvan, and a quarrel named Pelix, whom Amy knew only by reputation. It was a diverse team representing 6 different species and homeworld types. This should be interesting, Zixia commented as they gathered in their assigned planning room. We have a Deathworlder, 2 standard environment species, 2 low-gravity species, and Pelix, who technically lives in what we'd consider toxic conditions. Pelix, whose jelly-like body contained visible internal organs, rippled in what might have been amusement. My homeworld would indeed kill most of you within hours, though I suspect Morrison's world would return the favor to me. Then we'll just have to keep each other alive, Amy said practically.
What scenarios do we think they'll throw at us?
Lyra pulled up the colony system data on their shared display. 3 planets, 2 moons, multiple asteroid-based stations. The system is known for magnetic storms and unstable gravity pockets. My guess is we'll face environmental hazards, equipment failures, maybe practice hostile encounters. Over the following week, the team prepared hard. They studied each member's species-specific abilities and limitations. They practiced on equipment. Most importantly, they learned to work as a unit. Amy found herself in an unusual position. After months of downplaying her Deathworld origins, she now needed to help her team understand how to use them. Okay, let's review, Jexalon said during one planning session.
Amy, you have higher strength and endurance than the rest of us combined.
You can survive in a wider range of temperatures and air conditions. Your immune system is aggressive enough to handle most diseases. What are your weaknesses? I need more oxygen than most of you, Amy admitted. In thin air, I tire more quickly. I'm also heavier than I look, which affects equipment weight calculations. And while I can survive extreme temperatures, long exposure will still cause damage. I just take longer to reach that point than most species. So in oxygen-poor environments, Amy saves energy while the rest of us handle technical tasks, Lyra summarized. In extreme temperatures, Amy takes point while we stay protected. In situations requiring raw strength, Amy leads while we provide tactical support. Exactly, Amy agreed. But remember, I'm not invincible. Humans have limits. I'll push to those limits if needed. But you need to tell me when you need help too. This only works if we communicate. Pelix flowed into a shape suggesting thought. An interesting dynamic. Most teams try to make their abilities the same. We're embracing our differences. That's the whole point of mixed species crews, Zixia chirped. We make up for each other's weaknesses and strengthen each other's advantages. Deployment day arrived with typical military efficiency. The 6 teams were transported to various locations throughout the colony system. Amy's team found themselves assigned to Research Station Meridian, a small facility on Colonus 3's largest moon. The station was functional but basic. Life support, communications, scientific equipment, and emergency supplies. After confirming all systems worked, they settled in to wait for the evaluation scenarios to begin. They didn't have to wait long. 12 hours into the evaluation, the station's alarms activated. Ground instability detected, the automated system announced. Seismic event predicted within 45 minutes. Strength uncertain. The team jumped into action, each member falling into their prepared roles. Lyra and Kolvan secured the scientific equipment. Pelix reinforced the structure of their shelter, using a special sealant his species produced. Jexalon and Zixia reviewed evacuation procedures while Amy checked their emergency supplies. The practice earthquake, when it came, was fake but realistic. The station shook violently for 2 minutes. Several systems showed damage signs, all part of the scenario. The team worked through their emergency checklist, recording damages, redirecting power, and making sure life support stayed stable. First scenario complete, Jexalon announced as the shaking stopped. Everyone okay? Everyone confirmed they were fine. They'd handled it smoothly, exactly as trained. The second scenario came 18 hours later, a contamination alert in the station's water recycling system. This was Pelix's moment to shine. His species could detect molecular contamination that sensors might miss. Working with Amy, who could physically access tight maintenance spaces, they found the contamination, which was a harmless marker added by the test makers, and flushed the system. The third scenario was more challenging. Hull microfracture detected, the system warned. External repair required. Estimated time until critical failure, 90 minutes. The team reviewed the situation. The fracture was small but growing, located on the station's exterior. Someone needed to go outside and apply sealant. I'll do it, Amy volunteered immediately. Hold on, Lyra said. Let's think this through. The exterior temperature is 40 degrees below zero. Low pressure. Limited visibility because of the moon's dust clouds. Which means Amy is our best option, Zixia said firmly. She can survive the temperature longer than any of us. And her strength means she can work faster in the low-gravity environment. Amy suited up in the station's emergency vacuum gear. It wasn't built for humans specifically. It was a universal design meant to fit various body types, but it would work. As she went through the airlock, Jexalon's voice came through her communicator. 90 minutes, Amy, don't be a hero. If anything feels wrong, get back inside. Understood, Amy replied, fighting the urge to make a joke about Deathworlders and heroics. The moon's surface was hostile. The temperature was brutal even through the suit, and the thin air made every movement feel strange. But Amy had trained for this. She'd grown up in environments that would kill most galactic species. She could handle 90 minutes of discomfort. She located the fracture and began applying the special sealant. The work was slow and careful. Rushing could result in a weak seal. Time seemed to stretch as she carefully covered every bit of the growing crack. 60 minutes. Kolvan's voice updated her. Amy's fingers were getting numb despite the suit's heating system. The cold was seeping in, just as it had during the Section 7 incident. But she kept working. Humans were persistent. They didn't give up just because things got uncomfortable. 30 minutes, the seal was almost complete. Just a few more inches. Amy's hands shook slightly, not from fear but from cold and effort. She forced them steady. 15 minutes. Almost done, Amy reported, applying the final section of sealant. Running verification now. She used the handheld scanner to check the seal quality. Green lights across the board. Seal complete. Heading back inside. As she went through the airlock and stumbled back into the warmth of the station, her team was waiting. Pelix immediately offered her a warming blanket while Zixia helped her out of the suit. Nice work, Jexalon said simply. There was no need for more. The team understood what she'd endured out there. The evaluation continued with scenario after scenario, a practice medical emergency that tested their knowledge of cross-species first aid, a communications failure that required them to build a makeshift transmitter, a resource shortage that forced them to prioritize which systems to maintain. Through it all, the team worked like a smooth machine. Each member contributed based on their strengths, supported others through their weaknesses, and kept clear communication throughout. The final scenario came on the third day, just as they were beginning to think the evaluation was ending. Emergency signal detected, the station system announced. Distress signal from Research Station Kappa, 40 kilometers north. Signal shows catastrophic system failure and casualties. Response requested. The team exchanged glances. This wasn't a repair job or a survival situation. This was a rescue mission. That's outside our facility, Lyra pointed out. Are we authorized to leave the station? Amy checked the evaluation rules on their display. The rules say we're